It started with a clipboard. Not a threat, not a lawsuit, just a stiff piece of white plastic with a metal clip on top. Held by someone who believed, truly believed, that she was doing the right thing. Cedar Ridge Estates wasn't flashy. No gated entrance with security guards, no marble fountains. Just a quiet curve of paved roads looping around a wide, calm lake tucked into the pines of northern Georgia. About 200 homes, most built in the late 90s brick fronts. 2-car garages, flower beds tended more out of habit than passion. In the summer, kids biked the same paths their parents had. In the fall, neighbors waved from driveways while raking leaves. It felt like the kind of place where nothing big ever happened. And for years, that was true. The Lake Sycamore Lake was the heart of it all. Not huge, but big enough. You could kayak across in 10 minutes. There was a little sandy spot near the clubhouse where families gathered on weekends. Towels spread out, coolers open, kids shrieking as they ran into the water. No lifeguard, no fees, just a shared understanding this was theirs. The community's. It wasn't posted anywhere, but everyone assumed the HOA owned it. After all, they collected dues that covered lake maintenance water testing every month. A guy who came in spring to pull out fallen branches. Even a small buoy marking the swim zone. It's like that had to mean something, right? The woman with the clipboard thought so. She'd lived in Cedar Ridge for 14 years. Moved in right after retiring from a long career in human resources, 30 years of policies, procedures, and making sure things were fair. She brought that same energy to the HOA board, and after 2 quiet terms as secretary, she became president. She didn't run for power. She ran because no one else would. Because she noticed when trash cans weren't pulled in by 8 a.m. When someone painted their front door a shade of red that wasn't on the approved list. When a new fence went up 2 inches too tall. To her, rules weren't restrictions. They were promises that everyone would be treated the same. That the neighborhood would stay safe, clean, and predictable. She kept a 3-ring binder of the HOA's governing documents in her hall closet, organized with color-coded tabs. She knew Section 7.3 by heart. No private docks, rafts, shoreline alterations, or permanent water access structures may be installed without prior written approval from the Architectural Review Committee. So when she heard through the usual neighborhood grapevine, the kind that travels fastest at the mailbox cluster near Oak Hollow Court, that someone on the far side of the lake had built something by the water, she didn't get angry. She got concerned. Then she got her clipboard. The property in question was small, tucked into a bend where the trees leaned over the bank. A modest ranch-style house, older than most, with a weathered deck and a patch of wildflowers where a lawn used to be. The owner wasn't what people expected. He wasn't loud or flashy. He worked from home, spent weekends walking the woods with binoculars, and waved politely, but didn't linger at block parties. He'd bought the place 2 years earlier after his job moved him south. He liked the quiet, liked that the lake wasn't crowded, liked that you could still hear frogs at dusk. One Saturday morning, just after dawn, he'd carried down a few pieces of smooth, sanded cedar left over from a bookshelf project hand, a couple of stainless steel brackets, no power tools, no concrete, just careful measuring a level and a drill. By noon, he had a simple rack, waist high, angled gently toward the water, just wide enough to hold 2 kayaks side by side. The base sat 6 inches above the high water line, on his own bank. When not in use, the whole thing could be unbolted and carried up to the shed in under a minute. He even painted it a soft gray-green to fade into the reeds. He wasn't trying to make a statement. He just didn't want to drag his kayak through the mud every time he wanted to paddle. But in Cedar Ridge, where most lake access happened at the shared beach crowded on weekends, full of sunscreen and shouting and floating noodles, the idea of private lake use, it itched. The first complaint came from a man 2 streets over. Looks like he's claiming part of the lake for himself, he told a neighbor. Who told another, who finally mentioned it casually. Over coffee at the monthly HOA board meeting, the woman with the clipboard made a note, not in anger. In responsibility, she waited until Tuesday, when the lake would be quiet. Dressed in pressed khakis and a light sweater, She walked the half-mile trail around the water's edge, clipboard in hand, HOA letterhead tucked in the folder. She rehearsed her tone in her head, friendly but firm, respectful but clear. This wasn't personal. It was about consistency, about fairness. If he could put up a dock well, a rack, but same principle, then what about the next person? And the one after that? Where would it end? She found him in his yard, trimming back a low-hanging branch. He turned when he heard her footsteps on the gravel path. "Morning," she said, offering a smile. Warm, but with the kind of crispness that comes from someone used to leading meetings. He nodded, wiped his hands on his jeans. "Hi there." She introduced herself not by name but by title, HOA board president. Then, without pause, she explained the concern. She held out the printed copy of Section 7.3. "No hard feelings," she added quickly. "We just need everything to go through the review process. Standard procedure. A quick application? Maybe a sketch, nothing major?" He didn't take the paper. Just looked at it, then at the rack, then back at her. After a quiet beat, he said, "I appreciate that. But I don't think the HOA has authority over this part of the shoreline." She blinked. Not because it was rude, but because it was so calm, so certain. "Oh," she said, keeping her voice light. "I'm not sure what you mean. The lake is common property. We manage it for everyone." He nodded slowly, like he'd heard that before. Then he turned and walked toward the house. For a second, she thought he was dismissing her, but he came back with a manila folder. Slightly bent at the corners, inside were two things: a copy of his property deed and a faded plot map, printed on thin paper with a watermark in the corner that read Fulton County Surveyor. 1997. He pointed to a line running like a gentle curve across the page's lot boundary. It didn't stop at the tree line. It kept going, all the way across the water, to the middle of the lake. "See here?" he said, tapping the map with a clean fingernail. "My lot extends to the center line of the lake bed. That means, legally, the land under the water from my bank to the middle is part of my property. Same as the yard." She frowned, scanning the document. The words were there, plain as day. Thence along the meander line of Sycamore Lake to the center line thereof. But it didn't feel right. Didn't match what she'd always known. "That can't be accurate," she said, not unkindly, more in disbelief. "The HOA maintains the lake. We test the water every month. We post the swim area. We've done that for 20 years. "So you do," he said, "and I appreciate it. But maintaining something doesn't mean you own it. The county mows the roads in front of my house, but they don't own my driveway." She pressed her lips together. This was new, complicated, and in her experience, complications were what happened when people tried to bend the rules. "Let me check with our attorney," she said, tucking the folder under her arm, not taking it, just holding it for a moment. "But in the meantime, per HOA policy, I'll need to issue a notice of noncompliance. There's a $200 per day fine if it's not removed or approved within 14 days. His expression didn't change. No anger, no frustration, just a quiet steadiness. "Okay," he said, "but I'm not removing it." She left a few minutes later, clipboard still in hand, the folder returned to him. As she walked back along the path, she rehearsed what she'd say at the next board meeting. "We have a situation. A homeowner is refusing to comply. He's citing some old survey, but it contradicts decades of HOA oversight." She wasn't worried. Not yet. Mistakes happened. Misunderstandings got resolved. The system worked because people respected it. And in Cedar Ridge, respect had always been enough. But that evening, as she sat at her kitchen table with a magnifying glass over the HOA's original recorded covenants digging past the amendments, and updates to the very first pages filed in 1998, she found something strange. The section listing common areas included the clubhouse, the tennis courts, all roads and green spaces within the subdivision plat, but the lake, it wasn't listed. Not once, she double-checked. Flipped back. Scanned the index. Nothing, a small cold, not formed in her stomach. Not fear, just uncertainty. The kind that comes when the ground you've been standing on your whole time suddenly feels thinner, she called the HOA's longtime property manager the next morning. Does the HOA actually own the lake? She asked. There was a pause. Then, honestly, I always assumed we did, but I've never seen a deed for it. She hung up, walked to the window, looked out toward the water, glistening in the late morning sun, calm, unchanged. Everyone used it. Everyone loved it. Everyone thought it belonged to them. But what if it never had? The clipboard sat on her desk, the notice of violation still unsigned. For the first time in years, she didn't know what the right thing to do was. And across the lake, the kayak rack stood just as it had, simple, unassuming, bolted lightly to the earth, waiting. The unsigned notice sat on the kitchen counter for 3 days. Every time she passed it, she'd pause just for a second and look at the bold HOA violation header, the blank line where her signature should go. She kept telling herself she was being thorough, responsible, that good leadership meant checking facts, not jumping to conclusions, but deep down, she knew she was stalling, because once that notice went out, there was no taking it back. It would turn a disagreement into a conflict. And conflicts in a place like Cedar Ridge didn't stay small. They spread through email chains, over backyard fences, in the checkout line at the grocery store. She'd seen it happen before, over a disputed fence line, over a dog that barked too much. People took sides. Friendships cooled. Holiday parties got awkward. So instead of signing, she called a special board meeting. Not a full agenda, just one item: lake ownership clarification. She sent the invite on a Thursday night, knowing most board members would see it over the weekend. By Monday, all 5 had RSVP'd. Yes, they met in the clubhouse conference room, the same one used for yoga classes on Tuesdays and election polling in November. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Someone had left a half-empty water pitcher on the table. She arrived early, laid out copies of the original 1998 covenants, the 1997 plat map the lakeside homeowner had shown her, and a printout of Georgia State Code sections on water rights, skimmed, not studied. But enough to sound prepared. The others trickled in. A retired teacher who'd lived here since the first houses went up. A contractor who fixed roofs and knew every inch of the neighborhood. A young mom who joined the board to get involved. And the treasurer, a quiet accountant who never spoke unless he had numbers to back it up. She started the meeting with facts, not opinions. We've always acted like the lake is HOA property, she said, passing around the plat map. We maintain it. We regulate use. But legally, I'm not sure that's the full picture. She pointed to the boundary line stretching into the water. This shows the lot extends to the center line of the lake. And in Georgia, 4 non-navigable lakes, ones like ours, fed by springs, not rivers, the land underneath belongs to the adjacent property owners. That's called riparian rights. Silence. Then the contractor leaned forward. Wait, so if his lot goes to the middle, and the house across from him also goes to the middle, they each own half the lake bed between them. She nodded. That's how it works. The retired teacher frowned. But we've been using the whole lake for 25 years. Doesn't that count for something? It might, she said carefully. There's a legal idea called implied dedication, where long-term public use can create a kind of informal ownership. But from what I read, it's really hard to prove, especially if the HOA never formally accepted the lake as common property, and the records show it wasn't included in the original transfer. The accountant cleared his throat. Did we ever budget for lake ownership? Or just maintenance? Good question. She pulled out the HOA's financial history, thick binders going back to 2000, line by line, year by year. Lake maintenance, water quality testing, dock repair, shared beach area. Never property tax on lake, never lake insurance, never lake acquisition. Just upkeep. Like hiring someone to mow a yard you don't own. The young mom shifted in her seat. So, what does this mean? Does he get to put up a dock? Charge people to swim? Build a little island? No, the woman with the clipboard said quickly. State law still applies. You can't pollute the water. You can't block access to navigable waters, which ours isn't. But the DNR still regulates things like vegetation removal, and other landowners have rights too. He can't do anything that harms their use. But he can put a kayak rack on his own bank, the contractor said. More statement than question? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned to the group. What's our priority here? Is it enforcing the rules as written? Or preserving how things have always been? The teacher sighed. I just don't want this to turn into something ugly. That man's not causing trouble. He's not loud. He's not blocking anyone. He's just using his own property. But if we let this slide, the young mom said, what's next? Someone builds a real dock, then another. Then people start putting up private no trespassing signs. Before you know it, the lake's chopped up like a pie. Fair fear. A real one. They talked for over an hour, not arguing, just circling the same few worries. Fairness, precedent, community spirit. In the end, no vote was taken. No decision made. Just an agreement. Let's get a second opinion. Hire a real estate attorney. One who knows HOAs and water law. She called the firm the next morning. The intake paralegal sounded cheerful, efficient. We'll need copies of your governing docs, the original plat, any deeds referencing the lake. She sent them that afternoon. Via secure upload. 2 weeks passed. Then came the email. Subject: Cedar Ridge Estates Lake Ownership Inquiry. She opened it after dinner. Laptop balanced on her knees, TV murmuring in the background. The attorney's tone was polite, professional, and clear. After reviewing the recorded subdivision plat, Book 1147. Page 89, Fulton County. The original Declaration of Covenants, 1998. In relevant Georgia case law, Bryant v. Lake Point, 2012. DNR v. Whitaker, 2005. Our preliminary assessment is as follows. Sycamore Lake is a natural, non-navigable lake. The original developer retained fee simple, titled to the lake bed, and did not dedicate it to the HOA or the public. Shoreline. Lots were sold with riparian rights, meaning ownership extends to the center line of the lake. The HOA's long-standing maintenance of the lake, while commendable, does not constitute legal ownership or an enforceable easement over the lake bed. In short, the HOA has no legal authority to regulate the lake itself or the submerged land beneath it. You may regulate the dry common areas, roads, clubhouse, green spaces, but not the water or the shoreline below the natural high water mark unless a specific easement was granted in a deed, which our review did not find. She read it 3 times. Then she printed it. Then she sat at the table, the paper in her hands, and just stared at the wall. It wasn't that she doubted the lawyer. It was that the world had tilted, just slightly. Nothing looked the same anymore that evening. She drove to the lake, not to the shared beach, but around to the quiet cove. She parked where the pavement ended and walked the gravel path, hands in her coat pockets. The air was crisp, early November. Leaves crunched underfoot. The water was still, darkening as the sun dipped behind the pines. She stopped where the path curved, about 50 yards from the gray-green kayak rack. It was empty now. The kayaks were stored for winter, but the structure stood firm. Simple and unapologetic. She thought about all the summer mornings she'd walked here, coffee in hand, watching kids splash near the buoy. She thought about the meetings where they'd debated whether to install a second lifeguard chair, whether to allow paddleboards in the swim zone, whether to charge a small fee for non-resident guests. All of it built on a belief that turned out to be wrong. She didn't feel angry. Not yet. More. Exposed, like she'd been giving directions for years, certain of the route, only to realize she'd been reading the wrong map back home. She opened her binder, the one with the color-coded tabs, and flipped to section 7.3 for the first time. She read the fine print at the bottom, the part she'd always skipped. These restrictions apply only to property owned or controlled by the association. As defined in Article 2, Section 1, she turned to Article 2. Section 1, Common Property. means all real property conveyed to the association by the developer, via deed recorded December 3, 1998. Specifically described in Exhibit A, she pulled up the DAD online county records, public and free, scrolled to Exhibit A, listed clubhouse 0.8 acres, tennis courts, Ling Der Wu, internal roads, Are There Ye, open green space 7.3, no mention of the lake, not even a footnote. The next morning, she did something she hadn't done in years. She called the lakeside homeowner directly. Not a letter. Not a notice. A phone call. He answered on the second ring. She took a breath. Hi, it's her name, from the HOA board. I wanted to talk just for a few minutes. No agenda, no pressure. I think I misunderstood something. And I'd like to hear more about how you see this. He was quiet for a moment. Then, sure, I'm home this afternoon. Coffee's on, she went, not in her HOA president uniform. No blazer, no clipboard. Just jeans, a sweater, and the printed legal memo folded in her bag. He met her at the door. No awkwardness. No victory in his eyes. Just a quiet come on in. His house wasn't fancy, warm. Books on shelves. A map of Georgia rivers on the wall. 2 mugs steamed on the kitchen table. She didn't sit right away. Looked out the window, past the deck, down the slope, to the lake. It's beautiful from here, she said. It is, he said. Especially at dawn, the mist rises off the water, and for a little while it's just still, like the world's holding its breath. She nodded. Then she pulled out the lawyer's email and slid it across the table. I read this, he said, glancing at it. I didn't want it to come to this. I know, she said. Neither did I. He talked not about rules, not about rights, but about why. Why the lake mattered. Why the HOA rules felt necessary. Why he hadn't just gone along to get along. I'm not trying to keep people out, he said. I've seen kids fishing from the bank downstream. I wave. I don't care. But when someone shows up with a clipboard and says, you're breaking the rules and the rules don't actually apply, it's not about the rack. It's about being told, your home isn't really yours. She felt that. Really felt it. Later, walking back to her car, she thought about how easy it is to confuse care with control. To believe that because you look after something, you own it. That because you've always done things one way, that way must be right. The board met again the following week. She didn't bring the legal memo right away. First, she asked everyone to close their eyes. Picture the lake, she said. Just picture it. The color of the water in July, the sound of the loon call last spring, the way the light hits the far shore in the evening. They did. Then she asked, what do we really want to protect? Not ownership, not authority, the feeling, the shared joy, the safety. The trust that your neighbor won't turn the place you love into something unrecognizable. That's when she handed out the attorney's letter. No one argued. No one got defensive. They just read, and sighed, and nodded. The contractor spoke first. So, we can't fine him. No, she said. Can we ask him to keep the rack low profile? Maybe match the natural colors? We can ask, she said, but we can't require it. The teacher smiled faintly. Maybe we don't need to. Maybe we just need to talk. That night, she opened a new document on her laptop. Title, Cedar Ridge Lake Stewardship Proposal, Draft. 1. First line, the lake is not ours to control, but it is ours to care for voluntarily, together. She didn't know yet how it would work. But for the first time in weeks, she felt hopeful, because sometimes the strongest communities aren't built on rules. They're built on humility and the courage to say, I was wrong. The kayak rack still stood by the water, and this time, no one reached for a clipboard. Winter settled in gently that year. Not much snow, just a few cold snaps, frost on the car windows, the lake shrinking slightly as the water table dipped. Most of the neighborhood tucked in, holiday lights went up, firewood was stacked, Kayaks and paddleboards vanished into garages. The shared beach sat empty, the buoy pulled for the season. The sand covered with a light dusting of pine needles. The kayak rack stayed. It wasn't defiant. It was just there, a quiet presence on the bank, like a bench or a bird bath. Gray-green, low to the ground, empty now, but clearly meant to come back to life in spring. Some neighbors walked past it on weekend strolls and barely noticed. Others slowed just for a second, as if checking a landmark. The HOA board hadn't issued a fine, hadn't sent another notice. Instead, they'd begun meeting monthly, not in the fluorescent-lit clubhouse, but in living rooms, kitchens, sometimes over coffee at the diner on the edge of town. They were drafting something new, a lake stewardship agreement, voluntary, no enforcement. Just shared guidelines, water testing schedules, invasive plant removal, noise limits after 8 p.m. signed by shoreline owners who wanted to participate. The idea was catching on. 6 owners had already said yes. Even the lakeside homeowner had agreed to host the spring water test. But not everyone was ready to let go of the old way, eh? Few residents still believed deeply that the lake was meant to be shared, not divided. That if one person could claim part of it, even just the muddy bank where they launched a kayak, then the whole spirit of the place was at risk. And in that group was the same woman who'd first brought it up at the mailbox, cluster-sharped. Long-time resident, the kind who organized the neighborhood cleanup days and always remembered your kid's name. She'd admired the HOA president's integrity, her willingness to dig into the records. But she also felt uneasy, like the ground was shifting under her feet, and no one was holding the map anymore. So she did what felt natural. She tried to help. She gathered to others, both well-meaning, both convinced the HOA still had some kind of moral authority. If not legal land, they made a plan. Not to confront. Not to accuse. Just to remedy. They'd read the CCRs themselves. Section 7.3 was still on the books. No one had repealed it. And in their minds, that meant it was still valid, though the board officially changed it. Which they hadn't. Not yet. They waited for a Saturday morning when the forecast was clear and mild February. But feeling like early spring, the kind of day where you open the windows, sweep the porch. Think about pulling the kayak out early. They brought gloves, a cordless drill, a plastic bin. Their plan was simple. Remove the rack. Not destroy it. Not throw it away. Just unbolt it, carry it up to the shed door, and leave a note. Per HOA CCR 7.3, awaiting ARC approval. We've stored this safely until review. They told themselves it was neighborly, responsible, better than fines or lawyers. They didn't call ahead, they didn't knock, they just walked down the path. Past the no trespassing sign posted after a raccoon got into the compost bin, not about people, and stepped onto the bank. The rack was exactly as it had been bolted to cedar posts driven into the firm clay, at just above the water line. One of them knelt, fitted the drill with a socket bit, and began loosening the first bolt. That's when the back door opened. He stepped out barefoot, holding a mug, hair still damp from the shower. He didn't shout, didn't run, just walked down the slope, slow and steady, like he was heading to check the bird feeder. "Hey," he said, voice calm. "Can I help you with something?" They froze. The one with the drill stood up, turning off the motor. "Oh, hi, we didn't see you. We're just helping out. The HOA board hasn't updated the rules yet, and since this wasn't approved, we thought we'd store it for you. Keep things consistent." He looked at the half-loosened bolt, then at the bin. "I appreciate the effort," he said, "but that's my property, and I'd prefer you didn't remove it." "It's not about ownership," the woman said, stepping forward. "It's about fairness. If everyone starts doing their own thing, where does it end?" "Fairness is important," he said. "So is the law. And the law says I can have this. I'm not blocking access. I'm not charging anyone. I'm not dumping anything in the water. I'm just launching my kayak from my own bank." "But the feeling of the lake," she started, "matters," he finished gently. "I agree. That's why I joined the stewardship group. That's why I test the pH every month and share the results. But feeling doesn't override deed records. The drill holder shifted. Look, we're not trying to cause trouble. We just want to follow the rules that are still in place. And I'm not breaking any, he said. The HOA attorney confirmed that 2 months ago. The board knows it. If you'd like, I can email you the letter. It's a silence settled, not hostile, but thick, uncomfortable, the kind that happens when well-intentioned. People realize they're on opposite sides of a line no one saw coming then. From the path behind them, a voice, "Everything okay down here?" It was a neighbor at Tired, lived 3 doors down, known for walking his dog at all hours. He'd paused, leash in hand, watching. "We're just having a discussion," the woman said quickly. The lakeside homeowner nodded. "Yeah, just clearing up a misunderstanding." The neighbor didn't move, just stood there, quiet. Taking it in, that's when the woman with the drill, flustered, said the one thing she didn't mean to say, but the words came out anyway. Sharp with frustration, "This lake belongs to the HOA," the neighbor without thinking. Phone already in his hand lifted it slightly. Not aggressively. Just enough, because he'd heard that before. In meetings, but never out loud, on someone's private property. While they were removing something that wasn't theirs, he didn't start recording right then. But 10 seconds later, when voices rose just a little, when the woman said, "You're violating the spirit of the community," and the homeowner replied, calm as ever, "The spirit's great, but the law's clearer," he pressed record. 90 seconds. That was all it took. He didn't post it that day. Sat with it. Slept on it. But Sunday morning, over coffee, he showed it to his daughter, who worked in local news. She watched it twice. "Dad," she said, "this is actually important. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's ordinary. This happens everywhere. People think the HOA owns the lake, the pond, the creek, and sometimes they don't. I don't want to embarrass anyone." "You're not," she said. "You're showing how easy it is to get this wrong, and how hard it is to fix it." So he sent it to a reporter. He knew, a woman who covered city council and zoning, not scandals. She called the HOA president first, gave her a chance to respond. The president didn't dodge, didn't spin. She said, "I wish it hadn't come to that." But the video reflects a real moment of confusion we've all been working through. We're correcting it. The article ran Tuesday afternoon on the local news site. "This lake belongs to the HOA," viral clip sparks. Reckoning over hidden property lines and subdivisions. It wasn't sensational. It quoted the attorney. "Included a map," explained riparian rights in plain terms. And it ended with a quiet line from the lakeside homeowner. "I don't want special treatment. I just want the rules to match reality." Within hours, the comments section filled not with rage, but with stories. "We had the same thing happen at our pond in Alpharetta. Turns out 3 families own the bottom. We're still figuring it out. My dad fought this in the 90s. Developer sold the lakebed separately. Took years to sort out. Thank you for showing this. My HOA just fined me for a bird feeder near the creek. Now I know where to look." Then the state's Department of Natural Resources sent a polite email to the HOA president. "Given recent public interest, we'd like to confirm Sycamore Lake's classification and offer guidance on riparian responsibilities." They came the next week not with inspectors, but with a biologist and a land records specialist. They walked the shoreline. Took water samples not for enforcement, but for baseline data. Confirmed what the attorney had said. Natural spring-fed lake, not navigable, no state ownership. Riparian rights apply. The biologist even pointed out something no one had noticed. A patch of native pickerel weed near the kayak rack, the kind that stabilizes banks and supports dragonflies. "Whoever's letting that grow," she said, "is doing the lake a favor." News crews didn't swarm. No shouting matches on the lawn. But the story spread. Not as a fight, but as a lesson. A quiet ripple. Back in Cedar Ridge, things shifted. The woman who'd brought the drill stopped by the lakeside house the following Saturday. No bin, no tools. Just a paper bag with 2 still warm biscuits from the bakery. I was wrong, she said, standing on the path, not stepping onto the bank. Not about wanting fairness, but about how to get there. Took the biscuits. Thank you. I read the plat, she added. All of it. Took me 2 nights with a magnifying glass. It's humbling, he smiled. Joined the club. The HOA board held a town hall not in the clubhouse, but outside, under the big oak, near the shared beach. Folding chairs in a circle. No podium. No agenda packets. The president stood, not at the front, but among them. We thought we were protecting something, she said. And we were. Just not the way we thought. We were protecting an idea of fairness that didn't match the facts. And when the facts changed, we held on too tight. She didn't apologize for caring. She apologized for not listening. Sooner then, she opened the floor, and people talked. A man whose grandfather owned the land before it was. Subdivided shared old photoscows grazing. Where the tennis courts were now, the lake wild and unnamed. A young couple asked how to find their property lines gently, without accusation. Someone else suggested forming a real lake group not under the HOA, but as a separate nonprofit, open to anyone who wanted to help. No one mentioned the video. Not once. But everyone knew it had done something unexpected. It hadn't divided them. It had given them permission to ask questions they'd been too polite toward sure to ask before. That evening, the lakeside homeowner walked the path again, same as always. Paused at the rack. Noticed something new. A small, smooth stone, placed deliberately on the top beam. Gray with a streak of white quartz. A peace offering. Or maybe just a marker like a trail sign saying, "We see you. We're still here. Let's figure this out." He left it there. Up the hill in her kitchen, the HOA president opened her laptop. Deleted the old violation notice draft. Opened a new file. Stewardship agreement. Final draft opening, parenthesis V for closing parenthesis. She added a new line at the top. In bold, this agreement is built on truth, not assumption. Then she hit save. Outside. The first frogs of the season began to call. Not loud, not all at once, just a few, testing the air, waiting for the rest to join in. Spring came early that year. By mid-March, the reeds along the shore were green again, tufted with new growth. The lake rose a few inches from the winter rains. Lapping gently at the bank just below the kayak rack, still there, still empty, still waiting, and still no fine had been issued. No enforcement, no escalation. But the quiet wasn't the same kind of quiet as before. The calm had come from things feeling settled, known, fixed, under control. Now, the calm was different. It was the kind that follows a storm you didn't see coming. Not peaceful, exactly, but watchful. People were listening more, pausing before they spoke, asking, "Is that actually true?" Instead of just repeating what they'd always heard, the HOAS. Insurance carrier noticed. They sent a routine renewal questionnaire, one of those. Thick PDFs full of checkboxes and describe any pending disputes. The treasurer got to Section 8. Has the association asserted control over any property it may not legally own? He didn't skip it. He called the president. "We need to answer this honestly," he said. "If we check no, and it turns out to be yes later, that could void coverage." She knew he was right. So they did something they hadn't done in 20 years. They hired a second attorney. Not for confrontation. For clarity. Someone neutral, no ties to the HOA, no history with the developer. A woman who specialized in boundary disputes and quiet title actions. Known for her dry humor and zero tolerance for ego, she came to the clubhouse on a Thursday afternoon, carrying a worn leather satchel and a thermos of tea, met with the board, no notes, no presentation, just conversation. After an hour, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Let me be plain. You don't own the lake. You never did. And pretending you do, now after the video, after the DNR visit, after the first legal opinion isn't just wrong. It's risky. She didn't say it like a threat. Like a warning, yes, but the kind a good mechanic gives when they spot a worn brake line. You can drive it today, but don't wait. Then she turned to the lakeside homeowner. What do you want? He didn't hesitate. I don't want money. I don't want to sue anyone. I just want it settled on paper, so no one shows up with a drill again. So my kids, if I ever have them, won't inherit this fight. Then the cleanest way is a quiet title action. You file, the HOA doesn't oppose, the court reviews the deeds and issues a judgment. No trial, no headlines. Just a final binding record. This is who owns what. The board talked it over not in a meeting, but in quiet conversations over the next few days. One said, "It feels like admitting we were wrong." Another answered, "We were wrong." The question is whether we want to be wrong and exposed, or wrong and fixed. They chose fixed. The paperwork was filed in early April, not with fanfare, but with the kind of care people use when signing a mortgage or a will, affidavits, survey certifications, copies of the 1997 plat, the 1998 deed, the 2024 attorney letters, all submitted to the county courthouse, public record. No hiding. The HOA's new attorney drafted their response. Defendant does not contest plaintiff's claim. Defendant acknowledges it possesses no legal interest in Sycamore Lake or its bed. No blame. No defensiveness. Just facts. The judge assigned to the case was a man in his late 60s, with a slow southern drawl and a reputation for cutting through noise. He reviewed the file over lunch, 23 pages, all documents, no drama. Called both attorneys the next morning. "Y'all made this easy," he said. "No discovery. No motions. Just the truth, laid out clean. I appreciate that." He issued his ruling the following week. Not a verdict. Not a punishment. A declaration. Short. Clear. Final. The court finds, based on uncontroverted evidence, that Sycamore Lake is a non-navigable natural lake. The lake bed is owned in severalty by the riparian landowners, extending to the center line of the lake. The Cedar Ridge Estates Homeowners Association holds no ownership interest in the lake, its bed, or the submerged shoreline below the natural high water mark. The HOA is hereby permanently enjoined from enforcing any covenant, rule, or fine relating to the use, alteration, or access of the lake or its banks, except as expressly permitted by state law or granted by individual deed easement. He didn't scold, didn't lecture, just stated what was, and that was that. No appeal, no delay. Just a stamped copy mailed to both parties and posted online in the public docket. The lakeside homeowner printed it, not to frame it, just to have it like a deed, like a birth certificate. Proof that the ground beneath his feet was finally, undeniably his. The HOA board met the next evening, not to debrief, but to act. They opened their governing documents to Section 7, Architectural Standards. With black marker permanent, visible, they crossed out the entire subsection about the lake. Then, in careful script at the bottom, they wrote, "Per court order dated April 12, 2024. The HOA asserts no authority over Sycamore Lake or its shoreline. All lake-related provisions are hereby void." They didn't wait for a vote. Didn't need one. Everyone signed the page, dated it, filed it with the county that same week. The president visited the county surveyor's office not for a fight, but for help. She brought cookies. Asked if they'd be willing to host a free workshop for residents. How to read your plat. What riparian rights really mean. When the HOA can and can't step in, the surveyor. A woman who'd been doing this for 32 years smiled. "Honey, I've been waiting for someone to ask." They scheduled it for the first Tuesday in May. Meanwhile, something unexpected began to happen. Other shoreline owners, ones who'd stayed quiet through the whole thing, started coming forward. One brought his own deed, yellowed at the edges, asking, "Does this mean I own to the middle too?" Another asked about planting native grasses on her bank to stop erosion, something the HOA had once denied as altering the natural shoreline. The lakeside homeowner became an unlikely resourcer and an expert. Just someone who'd done the homework. He made a simple one-page handout. Where to look in your deed for water rights. No legalese. Just arrows pointing to phrases like thence along the meander line or to the center of the watercourse. He left copies in the mailbox cluster, unsigned. People took them. No one argued. At the board's next meeting, the contractor spoke up. We spent $3,200 last year on lake maintenance. If we're not in charge, who pays for that now? A fair question. The accountant pulled out a new spreadsheet not for dues, but for voluntary contributions, tiered, no names attached. $50 equals water test kit. $100 equals invasive plant removal day. $200 equals buoy and rope for shared swim area. Not required. Just offered 10 people signed up the first week, then 12, then 20, not out of fear. Out of care, the real turning point came in late April. The HOA's longtime property manager, the one who'd mowed the commons, fixed the clubhouse roof, known every dog's name, announced he was retiring. At his farewell potluck held in the park near the shared beach, people brought stories more than dishes. I remember when the dock rotted, someone said, "You rebuilt it with your own tools? Didn't bill a dime?" "I'll never forget you shoveling Mrs. Langley's driveway at 6 a.m. after the ice storm," said another. He stood, wiping his hands on a napkin, voice thick. "Y'all made this place feel like home. Not because of the rules, because of the people." Then he looked at the lakeside homeowner, and soon I saw that video. Not the angry part, the listening part. Afterward, that's when I knew we'd be okay. No one clapped, just nodded. A few tears, the kind that come when something broken starts to mend not perfectly. But honestly, later that night, the president sat at her kitchen table again. Same spot, same laptop. But this time, she wasn't searching for loopholes or drafting warnings. She was writing a letter, not to the attorney, not to the board, to the woman who'd brought the drill. Handwritten, blue ink, asterisk. "I've been thinking about what you said about fairness. You were right to care about that. We all were. Where we went wrong wasn't in wanting fairness. It was in thinking fairness meant sameness. Real fairness means seeing people as they are, and as we assume them to be. It means reading the map before giving directions. I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner, and I'm grateful you kept caring enough to try. Asterisk, she didn't mail it. Slipped it into the woman's mailbox the next morning. No return address. The reply came 3 days later, also handwritten, on-lined, no tap. Thank you. I'm learning too. Turns out, fairness isn't a rule. It's a practice. And practices take time, no signatures. Just two people choosing to stay in the same world. Even after the ground shifted, the court order didn't change the lake. The water was the same. The frogs still called at dusk. The loon still passed through in early May, gliding low over the surface, silent and sure. But something had changed. The fear was gone, not replaced by certainty that would come later, slowly, but by curiosity. People walked the shore not to patrol, but to notice. The way the light hit the cove in the afternoon. The new swallow nests under the old dock pilings. The patch of bluebells blooming near the north bank. One Saturday, the lakeside homeowner was down by the water, tightening a bracket on the kayak, getting ready for the season. When he heard footsteps, it was the retired teacher from the board. She carried 2 folding chairs and a thermos. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. He smiled. "Chair's a little damp." "I've survived worse," she said, unfolding one and settling in. They sat, watched the water ripple in the breeze. After a while, she said, "You know, I taught property law for a semester. Back in the 80s, at the community college. One thing I told my students, land doesn't lie. People do sometimes on purpose, mostly by accident. But the land? It just waits." He nodded. "Feels like it's been waiting a long time, maybe," she said. "Or maybe it was just waiting for us to catch up the hill, through the trees." The faint sound of kids laughing carried on the wind playing near the shared beach. where the sand had just been raked smooth for the first time that year. No signs had been posted. No fences built, just space, and the quiet understanding that fairness wasn't about control. It was about respect, and respect, turned out, could be rebuilt one honest conversation at a time.